25 years ago, my first New York Film Festival, I saw you do a whirling dervish in the late Derek Jarman's The Last of England. And I said in the pages of Spin magazine circa 1988 that you would one day win an Oscar in a more just world. Starting with a more just world and not trying to be too political, you recently took on Donald Trump and the battle for a golf course in Scotland. If you could tell me a little bit about that community and your role in it.
Well, the thing you need to know about that is that the New York Film Festival, in their great wisdom, have housed me for the duration of my stay here in the Trump Hotel. And I've been thinking, as I brushed my teeth, as I ordered my breakfast this morning, about my gratitude to mine host, Sir Donald Trump, given that recently we locked horns over the building, if that's the right word, of a golf course and general pleasure palace on some protected land in Scotland that I passed comment on. But anyway, it's a nice hotel and the breakfast was really ace. Thank you very much.
Well done. You didn't exploit your celebrity for that. You actually kept that in the limelight, and it was nice to see it happen. Returning to the film, Amy Taubin, the moderator, had described it as a comedy, and Jim described it as a character study, and I'm not looking to disagree with them. But I was thinking of his film Mystery Train, which I don't know if you've seen that, but in Mystery Train, he bemoans the sort of ghostly, slow death of Memphis, around the point that was American music. I thought this film, in looking at Detroit, was far angrier than that. I think that two things. It wasn't just perhaps a comedy and a character study. I think the third person in the film was humanity en général, and an indictment of same and our self-consuming behavior. Does this seem in any way an angrier film to you? Am I reading that subtext into the film? Because it did seem more than just a love story or a character story. It seemed a really seething indictment of humanity on the part of these persons who'd seen us play out our sort of contract.
That's very interesting. No, I don't see it as more angry. If anything, I see it as more hopeful. I mean, the first thing to say is that it is a proper vampire film. Having said that, when Jim first told me he wanted to make a vampire film, I think I said to him, but I feel like you've been making vampire films for years. I mean, they're all vampire films. Mystery Train feels like a vampire film to me. It's also a love story. So it's not just about one person who is truly not even angry, but depressed and disillusioned and alienated and truly lonely. But somebody else who's none of those things, who actually has the perspective of having lived for 3,000 years, I'm sure that does help, but has the perspective, for whatever reason, to see beyond that disillusionment and picks up his spirits in terms of keeping him company and encouraging him to change his focus. So I wouldn't say it's angry. I would say, if anything, it's more hopeful, because Jim tells a love story about how, even however depressed you get, if you are in commune with someone who truly, truly is there for you, then they might be able to reroute you and reboot your enthusiasm for living while we're here, which frankly is never going to be that long anyway.
Dynamite. I was looking at Heart for half a second. I love the sort of battle between the two of you. He said, just let the grains of sand fall to the very bottom of the hourglass. They said, no, that's the point at which you turn it over. And then that was a beautiful line about optimism. I was mildly reminded of a line in the film by David Cronenberg, Cosmopolis, where talent is more erotic when it's wasted. He was someone who sort of opted to be a sort of narcissus, while Goldman kept out there. Specifically, at the end of the film, they resorted to means of survival that heretofore you'd not seen. Their blood was delivered, I'm presuming, from cadavers or something fresh like that. So I'm wondering the extent to which you may have buoyed him from his sort of self-absorption, which, I mean, those were great lines, and I understand that, but you ultimately succumbed to cannibals in a world which is rife with same. Was that a lapse towards nihilism, or was that a buoyant understanding that we are all carnivores and we need to survive? Because I do understand your point about how you did buoy his spirits, and I loved your lines about that, but in the end it seemed like he succumbed to the very things that he loathed.
No, we don't eat the lovers, spoiler alert, at the end.
Oh,
we turn them. We suck them, and we move on, and they become vampires too. And that's obviously what happened to us years ago. So no, we don't eat them. I mean, the film is about surviving. How do you survive things? How do you survive not only death? How do you survive death? But how do you survive depression? How do you survive loneliness and boredom and self-loathing? And she has some perspective which gives her meaning in her life, which she shares with him. You know, she is someone who is somehow wired up to nature and finds that genuinely nurturing, and it's a dialogue. She's in dialogue with the universe in the way that he's let himself not be. He's kind of, you know, drawn the blinds and shut himself in. And she lives in Tangier, which is hotching with people, and he lives, hotching, Scottish word, I suddenly realised, full of people, I should say, and he lives in Detroit, which is, you know, at night when he's roaming about, virtually a wilderness with no humans around at all. So she's found these things work for her, keep her connected to some kind of enthusiasm for life. And she shares it with him. And it does work for a bit. But then they run out of blood. Because at the end of the day, as Jim says, they're not human. They do need blood. And they will die if they don't get it. And they don't eat those people. They just suck them and move on.
So the romantic self-sacrifice versus survival and the way we seem to be predestined to do understood entirely. You seem like someone who would make a dynamite director. You seem to take on certain challenging roles. Have you thought that you might want to direct something for
I know that I don't.
And the reason being?
I'm too lazy. I'm not wired that way. Certainly not at this moment in my life. You know, never say never, but I don't. It's like a, you know, something I keep picking up and putting it down because I don't want it. It's just doesn't. I'm living a very interesting life, doing all sorts of other things. But by the way, in terms of theatre and film, to quote Bergman, I've never been married. I have always been interested in my mistress' cinema. So I'm not interested in the theatre in that way.
Flashing back again 25 years, you can tell me about your first New York Film Festival here, the last of England, the late Derek Jarman, working with him, and what that might have meant to you. And then, I guess, to put it in a rather corny way, there are pivotal moments where, but for this or that twist of fate, I might be the person out there, and you might be the person behind the camera. In those 25 years, can you speak of certain roles or moments, highs and lows in your career, where they were absolutely pivotal, where you sort of were absolutely disgusted? So to back up, your first New York Film Festival, the late great Derek Jarman, and the pivotal moments or lack thereof in the time between then and now that you can look back on and say, wow, I'm glad I soldiered on and found myself here.
I feel that I can talk about one thing which answers or speaks to all of those things. Derek Jarman, I wouldn't be working in front of the camera were it not for Derek Jarman. He was the first filmmaker I ever met, and I met him at a point when I had decided I didn't want to be an actor for sure. And he opened the door and said, okay, so come and play with me then, in my kindergarten full of experimental misfits. And I stayed in the playpen for 9 years, and we made 7 films together, one of which was The Last of England, which is possibly my favourite film, in fact, that I've ever been involved in. And I remember very well bringing it here to New York, and somebody coming up to me afterwards and telling me the story of this non-narrative film, and me saying, yes, absolutely, absolutely, and him saying, is that right? And I said, yeah, absolutely, and someone afterwards saying to me, but that's not right. And I said, well, who are we to say? You know, you make a non-narrative film and it's for someone else to tell you what it's about. But that atmosphere of kind of freedom gave me the possibility to become this weird sort of half model, half clown that I am, that doesn't really feel like the kind of actor I thought one might have to be. I can't imagine ever having been able to develop that sort of hybrid with anybody but Derek Jarman. That kindergarten atmosphere and that the way in which he encouraged us to involve our own lives in the films. The films were very often autobiographical, as I say, non-narrative documentaries about family life with the Jarmans. That was, you know, heady meat for me. And when he died, very sadly, in 1994, I was up a gum tree. You know, I was never going to be a proper professional. So from that moment on, I've just been living on the fumes of my enthusiasm, which was sown by him in those 9 first years of me working with him. So really there's been nothing from then, since then and now, except for the delight of finding other people who I love to work with. I mean, it would have been possible to imagine that there was only one, and I lucked out. I worked with him for 9 years and then he died. But the real miracle of my life is that people keep coming out the woodwork and wanting to play with me, and I am having more and more long-term working relationships with people like Jim Jarmusch. This is the 3rd film I've made with Jim. Luca Guadagnino, Sally Potter, Lynn Hirschman, people who I've worked with time and time again and feel like family. So that early injection of benzene, that's seeing me right the way through, and I'm very grateful for it.
There's a line in the film where Adam expresses his contempt for humans and their fear of their imaginations. I dare say your career here before has encouraged folks to act on the same ways, and we trust you to do that. So well done, and thanks again. That's effectively it. Oh, anything coming up that you'd like to do?
Nothing coming up at all. I had another adventure with Wes Anderson, which we're all looking forward to seeing, the Grand Hotel Budapest, and I think I'm going to get a sneak look at it next week, so I'm very excited about that. But apart from that, no, watch this space.
Very much.